Hi, it's Tracy. Welcome back to my home here in Sussex, England, and welcome back to my Christmas decorating. This week we are out at the front of the property. We're going to be doing the porch. Now it may be a small space, but we are going to be doing some big statement decorating. We're going to be using Mother Nature and thrifted finds. I've got a big old front door, so we want a big statement wreath on there. So let's go back down to the field and we're going to make a wreath. Now I'm really fortunate that I've got this wonderful land to forage. We're down by the stream where we have a deck area, and I have not been down here decorating for quite some time, so it is all very wild and rustic. The wreath base I'm going to use is one I've had for over 15 years. It's made of straw. I use it again and again, and I just keep wrapping it in a hessian ribbon. Now last week I took you down here to these trees that I'm raising the canopy of, but rather than doing them all in one go, I'm clipping as I go for the decorating. Last week we were doing the staircase, so do check that one out if you've not seen it already. The leylandite is a great material to work with because it lasts such a long time. I've brought another wreath base down just in case. It's a long way back up to the house, so I bring a few bits and bobs down with me in case inspiration takes me off in a different direction. I'm using 22 gauge wire because it's nice and strong, and I have got gloves because sometimes skin can react, to these different plants. Once I've got my wire tied on, it's nice and secure, I can then start positioning my greenery. The method I use is really quite simple. I just lay it on, wrap the wire over, and then lay on again so it's covering up the wire. And I just keep working my way around the wreath. Now at this stage I do want to add some twigs. I've got a big twig pile. We've just brought a tree down because it was completely dead, but the twigs are covered in this beautiful lichen. They're so interesting and they have very drapey branches. So when we were taking it down, I made sure that we kept some to one side because I knew I was going to use it in the Christmas decorating. In fact, I'm going to try and use as much of the tree as possible. Nothing is going to waste, and it will appear all the way through the Christmas decorating this year. I do like to keep hanging a wreath up when I'm working on it, just to make sure the shape and form is going as I want. Now I'm quite happy with this as a base, so let's get it back up to the house, up to the garage, onto the door there, and we'll add some embellishment. These are teasels. I foraged these 2 years ago and I've been using them throughout in the decorating. Now I think maybe an ornament or something in the middle there just to say Christmas, and also snow spray. I like to put it on at this stage because I don't want the additional things that I'm going to add to be covered in the snow spray. Now if you saw last week's episode, you'll have seen me dyeing pampas grass, trying to dye it green, and it came out a beautiful dark gold. That is very much a theme that's going to run through the Christmas decorating this year, as is this amazing velvet ribbon. So that's the door wreath done. Now it's time to dress the rest of the porch. We're going to do something on the outside here, and then as you go into the porch, we've got the two sides. So here I've left the potato chitting crates and the mirror, and also the big dresser that has all the doggy paraphernalia in. We're going to go down to my storage sheds and have a look for some inspiration, see if there are things that we can use. Now, a couple of bits that are catching my eye are this old metal bin here, which is watertight, and I've got about 6 of these boxes, all in different sizes. I haven't used them in the house for ages, so giving it a good hose down, it was a bit so much dusty, but almost like a mould on it. Back down to the deceased tree, and I'm looking for a specific sized round. Now, there's no menfolk on the property today, so I'm having to do all the humping and lumping myself, and these things do weigh an absolute ton. Honestly, when my husband comes home and he says, "Oh, you've been faffing today, have you?" Faffing? Seriously? Now, I know I could wait for him to come home and move all these bits for me, but I'm just not very patient. You know, when I've got an idea in my head, I just need to do it. Now, I've got that leveled off with a little bit of bark underneath, and I'm going to fill that watertight container so I can add leylandii branches. Now, these are the ones that I cut last week when I was doing the staircase. I'm tying those on with cable ties onto the post. Now, we've used all the clippings from that first tree. Time to now raise the canopy on the second one and give me more clippings to carry on with the porch. If you want to do this and you don't have this type of greenery growing, ask around your family, your friends, your neighbours, even local tree surgeons, gardeners. They'd be happy for you to come and pick up the clippings. Now back down to the deceased tree. We're going to be visiting this a lot. When they were actually cutting it down, I got them to set aside some whole branches because I knew I was going to use them, and the shape of them are just going to be perfect to come up one side and then bend across at the top. Plus there's the added bonus that because they are completely dead, they are so light. There's no sap in these whatsoever. Now I'm also going to pop in a few of the twigs on the other side just to carry that theme up, across and down. Now we don't want to be seeing ugly cable ties, so all of those have been covered up with twine. We need to add lights. In fact, let's add 2,000 lights. Of course, they're on a tube, always put my lights on a tube. And I'm going to recycle some covered wire to attach them. Now I've spread them all the way out. I fed them in to the socket through the spindles, and I've marked off a certain length because I want to keep some wire on the inside. And this is the way that I basically measure when I'm outside. It's just a span of my arms. So I've counted out the same amount on each side, taped those off, and I'll leave those for later when we come on to the decorating on the inside. And with lights, I always like to work in and then back out rather than doing the old lasso or draping up and down. And it's doing a little bit of the old eye squinting as well. Do you do that with fairy lights? You stand back and squint your eyes and then you can see if you've got the balance right. Now we need some embellishment up there at the top, and particularly on this side here. So I'm thinking a big wicker star. I've had this for years, used to be in the house, don't tend to use it in the house anymore. I mean, you can pick them up all over. I'd like to say they're common, but that sounds a bit rude, doesn't it? They're very popular, should we say that? Quite big. I've got a slightly smaller one. I'm wondering, should I put the smaller one in? Now, if you've been with me for a while, you'll know that I don't do small, so of course the big one has gone in. As I always say in life, if you're going to have one, darling, have a big one. Now, Supervisor Bertie, forever the designer, is wanting me to include these rusting stars. These were actually bright silver, bought them from Home Sense a few years ago, left them outside to rust. But I've got somewhere else I want to use those, Bertie. So we're going to go with the pine clusters. Now, I made these last year, and I'm just going to do a quick recap on how I did them because they're such a great DIY to do. I'm wiring around the scales on this particular DIY. It really depends on the pine cone that you're going to use and how heavy they are. So whether you do them the other way around. Once I've got the wire in, I'm just going to wrap it around the rope and then twist the rope so it takes it further and further into the scales, and then give it a little knot. Now I've actually measured out 6 foot of rope here. I know it doesn't look like 6 foot, but it is, because I want the drop to be 4 foot. Now at the other end of this one, I am going to wire on another cone, and when I'm making these clusters, that's the only time I do it. It's because I want to create a really strong loop at the top. I want the drop to be from the top of the loop to the bottom of the longest cone, 4 feet. So I've put a tape measure out, measured that long, and then the cone that's on the other end is around about the 2-foot length. I've wired up the other cones. I'm using 13 in total on this cluster. And then I'm just adding separate lengths of string to each one of them. As I do them, I'm putting them roughly in the position where I would like them to hang. Once all the rope is added, I find it much easier to actually stand up. So I start with the 2 that are joined and then work up to my 4-foot length. And once I've got that, then it's just a case of taking each individual length and playing the up a bit, down a bit game until you get the desired effect. To secure everything together, I take a separate piece of rope and tie it very tightly, including all the tail ends. So I know where my loop is at the top, and then I've got all these tail ends that I'm then going to take this separate piece of rope and wrap around, around, around. It makes it very secure and it also looks really neat. When you've wound up as far as you want to go, snip off that rope and then give it a really good knot, trim off the tail ends and add the ribbon of your choice. It really is a super DIY. It's cheap, easy to do. It lasts for years. You can use it inside, outside. It makes a great statement. I've hung it here just with a cable tie, and I'm going to use a rustic ribbon on it. I know we're using the golds, but just check in with the supervisor. Is that okay? Are we okay to go with the rustic ribbon? Yeah, we are. There we go. Back to this sisal box, or maybe it's a trunk. We'll go with box. We're going to go back out into the garden and we're going to clip some evergreens. Now we've got lots of different types here, so I'm going to take a variety. As always, the supervisor is checking the quality of my work. Now, another element I want to bring in is bark. There was a lot of this that came off the deceased tree, so I think we should incorporate it. To ensure these clippings are going to last, I'm going to use a few plastic containers, which you won't see when it's all finished, into we're saying box, aren't we, not trunk. I get lots of messages about, and particularly at this time of year, how long this greenery is going to last. So the Leylandii, where it's in water, those big stems at the front, I will get maybe 3 months out of those. Unbelievable the amount of time they will last. Where the smaller ones are going in there, I'll probably get about 2 to 3 months. The ivies that you saw me picking, they're the ones that will go first. So I'd probably get about a month, 6 weeks out of those. It really depends on the temperature. The wreath on the door, if you keep spritzing it with water, again, probably about 2 months I will get off that. And I think it will probably do through to New Year. But we will keep checking in and see how everything progresses. Obviously, indoors is a separate matter, and that really does depend on how hot your house is and whether or not they're in water. But we'll have a look at that when we start decorating again indoors. not quite finished because, of course, twigs is a theme, so we need to add some of those. In this space, I'm just going to do something really simple. I'm going to take some pieces of the bark, I'm going to add some different pine cones and use the fairy lights. When you're decorating, you don't have to do massive, elaborate things. If you're on your own, if you, for whatever reason, don't feel like doing much decorating this year, just pop a few fairy lights around. Maybe a few pine cones, a few natural elements, light a few candles. You'll be amazed how magical it can feel. It's the next day we ran out of light and I've had a bit of a rethink. So I'm happy with the dresser, happy with the door, but I'm going to take the mirror away and I'm going to do something a bit different in this space. So love this vintage mirror. Can't remember how much I paid for it, but I think it might have come in a job lot. I've probably mentioned it in another video. My bad, sorry. But knowing me, I wouldn't have paid more than £5 or £10 for it. I'm going to add another one of my potato chitting trays just to lift it up. I'm trying to get it to the height of that wall. I'm a little bit off at the back, but don't worry, I have a cunning plan. Now remember that board that I was making those pine cone clusters on? This is part of a whole shelving unit that I bought from auction when I was doing the cottage. All the details are in the video that I made about the refurb of the cottage. Now remember, it was slightly on the wonk at the bottom, which means the top is looking a bit wonky. So just a little bit of scrap wood in there makes it all nice and level and my OCD can calm down. What to put in front of it? Well, I've got 5 sledges. I actually had one, was bidding on one at auction and it turned out there were 4 at auction, all vintage, fabulous. Spoilt for choice, so expect to see plenty of sledges appearing. We're going to be doing some more here, but before that, I want to just move to the other end of this run and talk about getting the last drop of life out of something. This umbrella stand bottom has completely rotted away, so I'm using a bucket in there and it just keeps on going. It does the trick. So my walking canes that I've been collecting all this year that I'm using in my decorating are just going to be popped in here. Did you see the staircase last week, what I did with them? Oh, I'm also adding some umbrellas as well because this is a practical space. Now what to pop next to them? Back down to the deceased tree. I told you we'd be coming down here a lot. Since we were last here, my lovely son-in-law has been over and he's been splitting wood and separating bark for me. So we've got some gorgeous firewood to keep us toasty. I found the round that I want and I've managed to get it into a wheelbarrow. Yes, I did have a tape measure with me because I only want to be lifting once. I don't want to be backwards and forwards, and boy, this one is really heavy. And if hubby says anything about faffing tonight, he's going to need one of those walking sticks. Oh, and if you're wondering where the furry supervisor is whilst I'm struggling away, he's deep in thought. Now what to go on this round? So I've got these trees. I bought them as tiny little diddy things, about £7 each back in 2019. And each year I just keep on potting them on and they are growing so quickly. I started off with 10. I've only lost 2. That's been my bad. I forgot to water them. I've got 3 elsewhere and then I've got these 5 that I bring in, but this one is struggling somewhat. So I've got it into the wheelbarrow. I'm going to use it in the porch and we're going to bling it up slightly, but before we do, I don't want to obviously be seeing a black plastic pot, so I'm going to pop it in a sack. Now normally at this stage I'd have my son around to help me do this. He's so good helping me with the decorating, but he's actually in Florida at the moment filming for a month, so I'm wrestling this one on my own. Do check out his YouTube channel if you're into golf. It's at Giles Gill Golf. He's a brilliant coach. Now, again, I'm going to use a little bit of wood just underneath to balance all that out. And I've got some more clippings. I'm going to work them into the brown areas and some I'm going to push into the soil. You never know, they may even root. Bertie has finished his contemplations and he gives me a look as if to say, "You've finally lost the plot, love." Oh, ye of little faith. I have a cunning plan to make all these tones come together, so watch till the end. A nice big ribbon around the sack just finishes that area off. Now back over to the board and the sledge. I'm going to make a swag. When I do these, I always like to start with something almost triangular. So I go through my clippings and try and find a nice broad spread, if you like, and then take different types of greenery and just layer them up on top of each other. Once I'm happy with the shape, I tend to take off a couple of inches at the top of any foliage. That's so I can actually get a really good fixing with a cable tie. I mean, you know, using plastic is not ideal, but these are so practical and I've got a big stash of them, so I might as well use them up. I'm keeping this one very simple and I'm just going to finish it off with ribbon. Now, I absolutely love this ribbon. It's the best value velvet ribbon I've ever found. I'll drop the links below. You can buy it on Amazon.com and on .co.uk, so both sides of the pond can get hold of this ribbon. Now I'm changing the angle of the sleigh because I've had another idea. I know exactly what I'm going to use on this board. My golf ball garland. Did you see the episode on how I transform golf balls into Christmas decorations? Here is the thumbnail. Go seek it out if you haven't. It's an absolute blinder. Love it. When you're decorating, to keep a cohesive feel to a scheme, it's always good to keep on repeating materials, maybe using them in slightly different ways. So underneath the sleigh, I'm going to use more of the bark and the pine cones. But what to put in this little area here? Meet my doorbell. We don't actually have a doorbell. We have this captain's bell that the deliverers have taken to ringing. Now, I did use Rub and Buff on this some time ago. It is wearing off. And when I say some time ago, I'm talking years, and it's been outside all that time. So I'm just using 3 different colours, which are the colours that I use through all of the schemes that I do. And I'm just going to start working different colours in, and I'm adding black wax and brown wax and just working that around with brushes, with a rag, and that's the finished effect. And it ties in perfectly with this year's colour scheme, which is green and gold and metallics. Now, I must remember to add the lights on, and I also want to add a couple of logs at the front here just to give that kind of cascading effect, along with some pine cones. Finally, I'm going to add a big spray of snow spray. We'll get the final inspection from Bertie. Yes, he gives his approval. And he asks ever so politely, please can you watch till the end? And then you can see the nighttime shots.